So when you say the middle of my show, Sherman,
Yep.
when should I mention that?
I start with the now media,
Okay.
and then go with you, okay?
So I'm thinking it sounds something along the lines of, you're telling your story. We might get to a point beyond the story, some questions about like vulnerability, and it's more like it's all about Susan, right? So we'll kind of judge on the gauge. So you and I will kind of feel
Okay.
how that story's coming across, and then once we feel like maybe we've told your story, you might want to shift to some of these other things that you're working on. Then we can say, you know what? Why don't we take a quick break? So I'll tag you up.
Good.
And that way we can jump on those spots.
Fantastic.
And is she in the Houston area?
In the Houston area.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Champions Real Estate Group Broker and Platinum Agent. She's in Houston. Located in the Houston area. Her email, he has that, and phone number, and he's going to go ahead and pull that up on the
Yeah.
screen.
And so as he's loading it up, I just say, for those of you that are consuming this content, the show, audio, her email address is,
Okay.
if you know it. Do you know it?
Yeah, I do.
offhand?
Got it.
And then, or you can contact her at this phone number,
Got it.
right? And then, if you.
Okay.
5, 4.
Hi, everyone. Hello, beautiful people. I'm sending you good vibes and a great big hug. Welcome to our first episode of Be Better with Susan.
Let's do it again.
Okay?
Once you get the intro out, then it'll flow.
I hope
It
so.
totally is how it is.
Ready? 5, 4.
Hello, beautiful people. I'm sending you good vibes and a great big hug. I am so excited to be here. This is our first episode of Be Better with Susan. My vision for this show is to create a community where we can come together, inspire, motivate each other, to share real life experiences. And also, there's a guest platform where guest callers can, There's a platform where there's a platform for guest call-ins to share what's heavy on your heart, to share what challenges you may be going through, and to see what I can do to guide you through. So a little bit about myself. My name is Suzanne Nguyen. At the age of 22, I was involved in a auto accident, which in results of that, losing my right arm. I was in the darkest place I'd ever known. I won't say too much because we actually have Sherman on here, AKA Crazy Asian. He's my good friend, my mentor, and he'll be interviewing me today so we can get to know each other a little more. We can talk about vulnerability and how I was able to get to a better place, and I'd love to share that with you.
All right, Susan, so not everybody has had the opportunity to read your book that you recently wrote, One Armed But Not Unarmed. And so why don't you tell a little bit more of your story of what happened and what got us here today?
Yes, I will. I'd love to share that. So at the age of 22, I was living life. I was loving life, right? I went out for a spontaneous night with friends, and when I was driving home, it was dark, it was drizzling, and I was at the wheel. A car hydroplaned on the wet street near us, and I reacted. I lost control of the wheel. The next thing you know, I'm ejected out the windshield about 50 feet. And the last thing I remembered was laying on the wet ground with the bright light above me, and I could hear people screaming and sobbing around me, and I knew there was something awfully wrong. I was taken to the hospital, Bentall Hospital, and spent many weeks in intensive care unit. During that time, I became depressed. I isolated myself. I didn't want to have I didn't want to have anything to do with anyone because the people in my previous life have never experienced anything close to what I went through. So although they were loving and supportive and affectionate, I felt like they didn't understand what I was going through. So I started to isolate myself. I started to become bitter and angry, and I was very lonely. Fast forward about 19 years later, man, it's been one heck of a journey. I had to retrain my brain to be positive again. I had to learn to do things with one hand. This is a new me, and I'm continuing to reinvent myself. I am definitely at a better place. I talk about the steps I took in my book, One Arm But Not Unarmed, but it's not easy. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication. But I ultimately decided that I wanted to be better instead of being bitter. And it's a daily practice. I get up every morning and that's my mantra. I repeat that and I practice and I make sure that I immerse myself in continuing to be better.
So one of the interesting things that you mentioned in the book about that, you're very vulnerable. And so a lot of times people, when they hear about traumatic experiences, they want to know if somebody kind of hit a rock bottom. Did you experience something like that? And if so, what was that like for you?
I did. I really did. And it was horrible. Losing my arm was already, my world came tumbling down. But during my recovery, I talk about it more in my book, One Arm But Not Unarmed. I was angry at the world. I was bitter. And I actually landed myself in jail because of the anger I was experiencing. So after being in jail for an assault case, because I was going through a whirlwind of emotions, and I realized that I was on the losing end of my anger. And I did realize that anger doesn't solve anything, but it destroys everything. Mm-hmm. So hitting rock bottom was me going to jail. Absolutely. And I remember that turning point very clearly. I was laying in bed and I'd been crying from dusk till dawn. I remember seeing the sun peeking through the blinds, and at that moment my eyes were almost swollen shut because I've been crying all night. I could barely open my eyes, and I remember how low I felt at that moment. I remembered how disgusted I felt with myself. First of all, losing my arm. Now, landing myself in jail and disappointing my family even more. That was my turning point.
So did you find this, at this turning point, where did this strength come from for you to want to be better and not bitter?
Yes, Sherman. So the strength came from leaning into my faith, and also I had to retrain my brain to be positive, and the strength I had came from a place I didn't even know existed. You know, there's a quote that goes something along the lines of, you never know how strong you are until your strength's been tested. Mm-hmm. My strength was absolutely tested. I didn't realize how strong I was until that occurred. And it took time, dedication, and love, and being vulnerable. Being vulnerable is key. Yeah. Because in the beginning of the loss of my arm, I was self-medicating, I was deflecting, I was bitter. The way I spoke to people, I was angry. I reacted to many situations. So I wasn't ready to be vulnerable. But once I allowed myself to feel those emotions and to feel the awful thing that happened to me, then I was able to move forward. But it wasn't easy. I could say that for most of us, when we go through something so horrible, it's hard for us to really experience that pain. Most of us just want to deflect and not even feel the pain, not even speak about the situation. But once we do, it is so healing, it is so healthy, and that is crucial in order to be able to move forward. There's something else I'd like to share. It goes, if we don't give the attention, the healing, the attention it needs, it will always return for resolution.
So in this like growth of recognizing that you wanted to be better, what were some of the small things you started doing to be better and not bitter?
Yeah, a couple of small things I started to do. I started to be around my loved ones.
Mhm.
I started to tell them how I was feeling, right? Another thing was I started journaling. Journaling is very important, and I actually encourage all of my coaching clients to journal. I feel like our thoughts are one thing, but when we're able to write it down on paper and see it visually, they become powerful, right? They're powerful and it's impactful. So I believe that journaling was a part of my process. And another thing I'd say is finding something that made me happy. I love being able to go to the beach and listen to the sounds of the waves of the ocean. That was my happy place during that time. So I made time to do that. Yeah.
So I know you were a right-handed person before. So how was relearning to write and learning to do things with one hand and a left hand?
Yeah, it was so difficult. I still have issues doing things with just my hand, but I feel like I don't want to complain about it or focus on the things I can't do, but I focus on the things I'm still able to do. But it is very difficult. Tying my shoe was hard, so now all I wear are slip-on shoes. That works. But writing is difficult. I still feel like my writing doesn't look great, but hey, I'm trying. But it is difficult. Everything with just one hand is obviously very hard to do. However, I just keep going because I remind myself how grateful I am to still be alive and to be able to do those things. And gratitude is something extremely important in my recovery as well. There's something that I coach my clients on, which is reframing, right? So reframing is a very powerful coaching tool. We always should try to reframe our thoughts, right? So I reframe the car accident and what happened, which was horrible, super painful. But then I'm still reminded that I'm still here. I'm around my loved ones. I'm still able to enjoy delicious food because I'm a foodie. I'm still able to be here sitting with you guys, sharing my message. So when you reframe certain situations and take the good out of the bad, that really helps with your positive psychology as well. Your EQ raises and you're able to really approach life differently.
Yeah, that's powerful. You had mentioned that at the time when you were looking for an opportunity, I guess you were just struggling with being better. At that point, I guess you'd call it your bitter stage, right? And you felt alone. I think a lot of people feel that way, right? We go through certain things, and although there might be a support group, there might be loving family, and you had some good friends, and they're more sympathetic than they are empathetic, right? Because you mentioned they hadn't gone through a traumatic experience like that, a tragedy. And so for you, number one, what helped you realize that they were there and you weren't alone in this journey?
And you're absolutely right. I feel like the people, my loved ones that were in my previous life before the accident, have never experienced anything I've been through, anything close to what I experienced. So I felt alone, but it took time for me to understand, to remember, and realize that they're trying the best they can, right? They're trying to show support to the best of their ability. And that's something I needed to continue to remind myself.
Yeah. So then when people interact with you,
just make a cut in 2 minutes more. So we make a
So we
commercial.
go for it.
And you guys can see how you doing, okay?
Okay. So then when it comes to engaging with that, if I'm approaching you, what's the right way, do you think, for me to be able to support someone that's going through some tough, tragic moments in their life?
That is a very good question. And I was at a recent speaking engagement at Adult Talent Development Association, Adult Training Development Association, and someone asked the same question you're asking.
Mhm.
I feel like we are all on a different journey, and we try to understand what other people are going through. Although it may not be something I want to hear or I want to see that you're approaching me with, I just need to remind myself that you're trying the best you can. So in my mind, I would approach someone, just let them know that I'm there for you.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'm here when you need me,
Mhm.
right? Because when I was speaking about what I was going through,
Yeah.
if someone were to say, yeah, right, I understand. Do you really understand?
Mhm.
I don't think you do, right? So sometimes words can affect that individual as well.
Mhm.
It may make them feel a certain type of way. So we just want to listen, which is important because most of us just need someone to listen to. Most of us just don't want any feedback. We just need someone to listen to how we're feeling, right? So I would say, I'm here for you whenever you need me. I just want to let you know that I'm here for you. I think that's safe.
And that's ultimately what we want to do here in the show, is you want to give people that kind of platform if they're not experiencing that in their own personal lives.
Yes.
Before we continue any further, let's take a break. Let's hear a word from our sponsor.
How do you think that went?
Good.
So everything I said was okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're
It's
right.
feeling good? Feeling?
I feel good. I feel like was all right.
One thing, in the beginning, you was pumping the glass.
Yeah, with my
and-
ring.
And ring and no,
Yeah.
the ring, the pump. Come on and see it, okay?
Oh, the pound.
I was doing that often.